You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for November 19th, 2024. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where, as the incoming fascist regime begins carving up our republic, like Hyman Roth cutting up his Cuba cake, and our Republican fellow citizens begin to suspect that things are not going great for them. In fact, they're getting worse. And they begin to fum-fa around about how, well, this is certainly not what I voted for. Remember to keep this audio on hand at all times.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal. Hey, Blue Gal.
Hey, Driftglass. Today is a good day for us to remember that we are not alone, or crazy, or doomed. And a pretty good medicine for that melancholy, in addition to gratitude, would be reading this entire article in Dame magazine by the amazing Athena. Now, we're just going to read a little bit of it, and we will link it in the description. The title is, Democracy is Dying in Broad Daylight. Corporate media spent the entire election, both when President Joe Biden was running and when he ceded the campaign to VP Harris, gliding right over the GOP's nonstop fire hose of falsehood and fear on the way to nitpicking gaffes and dates and parsing Harris's every move through a Republican lens. And I would remind everyone this is exactly what happened in 2016 as well.
Yep.
Back to Athena. The Los Angeles Times refused to endorse Harris for president, cloaking the decision in high-minded appeals to objectivity. The Washington Post quickly followed, along with more than 3/4 of American newspapers. When faced with criticism, media figures defended one another instead of engaging with critics who were basically begging, please do your jobs. Please do them better. Please stop promoting outright falsehoods. Please be the defenders of democracy you say you are during fundraising time. Any thoughtful critique was immediately characterized as an attack on journalism, just as damaging, if not more so, than Trump's threats to imprison and murder reporters. You know, both sides.
Both sides, baby.
Back to Athena. As angry readers who counted on the Washington Post to live up to its own dramatic democracy dies in darkness motto, canceled subscription, and New York Times journalists begged their own paper to stop fixating on Biden's age and focus on the danger Trump presented, higher-ups pushed back with glib dismissals, unquote.
Yeah, and one media outlet that has definitely set its cap against doing any better at all is CNN, where we can expect both-siderism to run wild and free for the next 4 years. Dana Bash was on CNN this week saying, we don't know what side of the aisle this comes from about the neo-Nazis marching in Ohio.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Does she have any reporters who could ask them what side they're marching on?
Apparently not. And can you see now how handy that Sam Jackson audio is going to be?
It's very handy, Driftglass.
Over the next 4 years.
From the start, we need to be very clear about what happened on Election Day 2024.
That's right.
This is from Pastor John Pavlovitz on the socials. Quote, this election result isn't about Dem messaging. Their messaging during the campaign was about helping the middle class, continuing with sound economic policies, affordable health care and education, the rights of women, strengthening the border, and unity. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz formed a balanced ticket filled with character, intellect, and genuine love for this country. And they eloquently delivered on their vision beautifully. This election result is about racism, misogyny, lack of education, and an irresponsible media that caters to those realities. There is no messaging that can overcome prejudice and ignorance. And those two factors are the only explanation for Trump even being the nominee and getting 75 million votes. We need to stop pretending there is some perfect Democratic candidate or magic messaging to reach people who have abandoned objective reality and chosen to embrace their fears and phobias, while failing to do the slightest bit of work to know what candidates' policies and plans are. The Dems didn't fail America. They just exist in a nation where far too many people don't pay attention or care to understand what's actually happening. Maybe they will now. Unquote. Sweet summer child.
Yeah, that's the only part I have a little bit of a disagreement with. No, they're not going to get any better. They're incapable of that. This is from Roxanne Gay in the New York Times. A short quote, Mr. Trump's voters are granted a level of care and coddling that defies credulity and that is afforded to no other voting bloc. All of us should refuse to pretend that any of this is normal and that these voters are just woefully misunderstood, unquote.
Yeah, that's the quote of the week. That really is.
It really is. And even curmudgeons who won't grant liberals an inch on anything like Tom Nichols, finally have had it. No, the voters on that side are fucking awful and stupid, and they like being that way. And I'm not going to say otherwise. Welcome to the party, pal. and that's why the reason it's so important that we're all very clear as to what happened on Election Day 2024 is that right now, even as we are speaking, there's already this massive rebranding scam underway to rewrite the official history of the 2024 election as something it very much was not. And it'll come as no surprise that at the forefront of this project to alter the history of 2024 before the concrete sets is the same guy who was at the forefront of rebranding the W administration and of rebranding the defeat of Joe Lieberman in a Democratic primary in 2006. Are you getting the hint? Same guy who was rebranded the rewriting of Republican sabotage of the Obama administration as somehow Barack Obama failing to be centrist enough. Same guy who dismissed Trump as a chaos clown, but certainly not a fascist. Of regularly predicting conservative renaissance that will never come. Of regularly predicting that the Republican Party has at last come to its senses, and it never did.
The same guy who swore the Tea Party were the salt of the earth because he jogged past one demonstration one day, and they weren't attacking the Black family reunion that was taking place in the same park. Who told everyone to calm down because the 2016 Republican nominee was definitely going to be Marco Rubio. The same man who dismissed the 2017 Women's March as silly and trifling. Turns out there really are guardrails in American politics, and they're actually very strong.
Yeah.
They're just not the ones you thought there were. These guardrails are enforced by hacks like David Brooks of the New York Times, enforcers of media norms who are forever vigilant against the encroachment of liberal critiques into the fantasy world they have created for their readers and sponsors. Mm-hmm. When the Republican Party's open fascism finally overflows the media dam and spills out into the open, that is when the work of hacks like Brooks prove their value to the legacy media, because they have one job.
PR people understand this, but they can never execute it. If you don't like what is being said, change the conversation.
Their job is to change the conversation to anything except we were wrong. Anything except we were complicit. And especially anything except the liberals were right all along. And over this last week, David Brooks has been part of an army of legacy media stooges frantically trying to change the conversation. How? Well, as I wrote in my blog today, he said, shamelessly promoting his own blog, back when I was but a wee drift glass, a shot glass, really, my sainted mother imparted this bit of wisdom to me. Son, she said, the best way to blunt any discussion of practical solutions to a real-life here-and-now crisis, especially a crisis you helped create, is to use your dominant media presence to deflect everyone's attention the hell away from that clear and obvious problem and onto a debate over some sweeping, unfalsifiable, sociological subject, one that's been extant for generations, which you can claim subsumes all discussion of all human problems, which conveniently holds no one responsible for anything because society is to blame, and which offers no solution of any kind to the real life here and now crisis which threatens you all. That was my mom. She was very wise. And that's what Brooks has been up to for the last week, trying to change the public square conversation from what John Pavlovich and Athena and Charlie Pierce and anyone with two eyes and a brain and a conscience can see. To re-quote John, this election result is about racism, misogyny, lack of education, and an irresponsible media that caters to those realities. There is no messaging that can overcome prejudice and ignorance, and those two factors are the only explanation for Trump even being the nominee and getting 75 million votes, unquote again. It's essential to change that conversation to some long, blathering theory by David Brooks that the Ivy League broke America. And to do this, David Brooks, who has more media clout than anybody else, has been everywhere spreading this bullshit. He was at the New York Times doing this, on PBS, NPR. He showed up on Morning Joe. Even the Bulwark. He was there at the Bulwark where host Tim Miller had the king of both sides do it journalism right there in front of him for 30 fucking minutes. And instead of asking Brooks anything substantive about that, he very gently pitched him softballs, and then, as I described on my blog, sat back as silent and inert as a field of Martian regolith while Brooks ran his mouth. But if we all put our backs into it, maybe this time the rebranding won't stick, and the Ivy League broke America excuse will go to the books alongside Aristotle was a Belgian.
Also, the central message of Buddhism is not every man for himself.
Don't call me stupid.
Oh, right! To call you stupid would be an insult to stupid people! I've known sheep that could outwit you. I've worn dresses with higher IQs, but you think you're an intellectual, don't you, ape?
Apes don't read philosophy.
Yes, they do, Otto. They just don't understand it. Now, let me correct you on a couple things, okay? Aristotle was not Belgian.
Oh.
The central message of Buddhism is not every man for himself. And the London Underground is not a political movement. Those are all mistakes, Otto. I looked them up.
And now we have a very special No Fair Remembering stuff that my wife found.
And can I tell them how I found it?
Absolutely. Go right
we
ahead.
We have a poem that Driftglass wrote hanging in our bathroom. And I framed this poem back when I lived in Alabama before I even met Driftglass because I thought it was so beautiful. And I'm not going to repeat the whole thing here, but it's about a guy in the shower who gets inspiration, just fabulous inspiration. And then a bunch of things happen, like the light bulb and the potatoes and the quotidian affairs of the day come into his thinking. And he gets out of the shower and realizes he's forgotten this wonderful inspiration for a poem that he had thought of in the shower. Mm-hmm. And he's terribly upset about it. And Jesus comes to him and says, "Please don't cry, son. Sometimes the music's for the many and sometimes the music's just for you." And the poem that he thought of in the shower is 20 dancing diamond lines. And this poem is 20 lines also. So there's irony in it. It's just a great poem about the bathroom. So I hang it in the bathroom because it's about inspiration in the bathroom. But one of the lines in it that I wanted to talk about today, and hopefully we'll get more time later on this year to talk about it, Driftglass mentions the eccentric way that prayers are answered. And I really want all of us to have a wry sense of humor about what is happening, and despite the disaster that it is, and the fact that there's an abuser in the White House who wants to gaslight us every day.
Yep.
And the media wants to gaslight us. And we're subjected to this. And we need to go no contact with a lot of this nonsense. But the eccentric way that prayers are answered, and how, you and I have talked about, Mark Twain and other sort of semi-comedic or comedic writers are up in heaven writing the script for all of this.
Yeah.
Dr. Oz now has a cabinet position.
Yeah.
in
charge of Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah, in charge of Medicare and Medicaid, which he's never going to show up for work. He's going to go to the cabinet meetings and, bow to Trump and go home and collect his check. That's what he's going to do. But look.
Well, you were going through my sock drawer.
in the middle of the terror of all of this, it's important to just have a little bit of understanding of how self-destructive all of it.
Yes.
And I believe in keeping our distance from it as much as possible. But also, I mean, I have to go earlobe deep into it every day for work. But it's not going to be the same as 2016. It's not going to be full-time resistance, full-time. It's going to be a lot of our prayers are going to be answered in an eccentric way. And we don't have to do a lot because of the self-destructive nature of all of it. We can sit back and watch it happen.
Now,
so I was looking for this poem.
Thank you. Thank you. Winding you back to the narrative.
Winding me back. I was looking for this poem and I came across this.
Right.
And I started reading it to Driftglass, and Driftglass said, no, this whole thing needs to go in. So we will read you the entire poem some other time. But in the meantime, here we go.
Yeah, this is my wife, as I said, went through my sock drawer, went through the archives on my blog, which anyone can do. They're coming up on 12,000 posts out there, and it's all searchable, and you can look up anything you want. And it's all a mouse click away. But this came to be thanks to her resurrecting this thing from October of 2012.
Yeah.
This has become a very special No Fair Remembering Stuff thing from the news blog by the late Steve Gilliard, because this is something he published on his blog November 8th, 2004. It was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, after the election that pretty much radicalized all of us and drove us into blogging. And I believe it's entitled, "They Voted for This Mess."
Yep, they voted for this mess. Yep.
And this goes out to all of our allies and fellow travelers who swear this all started in 2016, and that certainly they could not have seen it coming, because no one could have seen this coming. So we're going to alternate back and forth because this thing is long. Steve, when he got in his bag, was the king of TLDR writing. These are novella length essays. We're not going to do the whole thing. Maybe we'll do parts of it later, but we're going to alternate back and forth because this is a bit of writing. And so tuck in, especially if you were a fan of Steve and the news blog and knew me back when, put your feet up, because this is "They Voted for This Mess" from November of 2004. And now this is Steve writing and talking. MG65 sent this to me, and I think you might want to read this. Please, I don't deserve any credit for it. None. I just posted it. That's all. Okay. First of all, let's set the scene a bit here. From Daily Kos. I work at a domestic violence shelter in rural conservative district in Michigan that has its economy gutted by NAFTA and where Christianity dominates the culture. Yesterday, while reflecting about 4 more years of Bush, I was talking with a woman staying in the shelter. I will give her a fake name. Let's call her Laura B. Laura is 28, pregnant, never considered an abortion. Laura B. has found a job working in the kitchen at a local faith-based Christian college. She makes $6 an hour. She drives a dying Ford Escort wagon, pays $2.15 a gallon for gas. Her latest crisis is her car insurance, which expired on October 8th. Her ex-partner canceled the policy. She needs to come up with $211 to get insurance for 1 month or face a $1,000 fine if she gets caught driving with no insurance. She's been walking to work lately, but it's about 2 miles, and she's 5 months pregnant. It's dark at 5 a.m., and winter is coming. Solution? Go begging at the churches who seem to have money for these things. They will give her the money if she attends Bible school. So last night, she was at Bible school until 9 p.m. She has never attended our domestic violence support groups, and she's too tired at night and goes to bed early, but the Bible study was not optional. She was excited about God's message when she came back. This week, she moves into low-income subsidized housing. Her newest crisis is she found out when the college is closed for the Christmas holiday, 1 month. She has no employment. She is hoping to find temporary employment as a seasonal retail worker if the Christmas sales are brisk to tide her over. She doesn't know what she will do when the baby is born, hopes she can work up until the last week. She's on her feet all day long at this job. She will be eligible for subsidized daycare. And she voted for Bush because of his family value.
But wait, you think that's tragic?
Mm-hmm.
I know someone who lives in our neighborhood. This is still from Steve's post. She is in her mid-20s and has a 5-year-old girl, single parent, working as a waitress at the local restaurant. The restaurant closes 2 weeks out of the year, and during that time, she does not get paid. She decided to go to night school to become a nurse. She is squeamish about needles and blood, but this was the only opportunity she had to better herself. The schooling is free if she contracts to work for the healthcare organization for 4 years. Another waitress at the restaurant came into work sick and gave everyone a nasty virus. She couldn't stay home sick because she gets no sick pay. She continued to work and got so ill that she had to go to the emergency room and stay in the hospital. Again, remember, this is 2004. She has no health insurance, and her medical bills came to $17,000. She had to drop out of classes because she had to work part-time to make up for her lost wages while she was sick and start paying her medical bills. Fortunately, her daughter does have health care coverage, courtesy of our previous Democrat governor, Jeanne Shaheen, starting a state program to provide child health care. I will add that came straight out of Hillary Clinton's work.
Yes, absolutely. The one she was able to get through.
Yep, CHIP.
Mm-hmm.
The waitress, this is the healthcare worker, former healthcare worker waitress. She voted in this election for the first time in her life. She voted for George W. Bush. Her pastor told her to.
Yeah. So now how much would you pay, right? But wait, there's more. Back to Steve's column. My stepfather's mother, a Northeast Nebraska housewife all her life, used to drive my mother crazy with her political views. A widow living solely on Social Security benefits and paying her doctors with Medicare, Grandma Elsie constantly spouted something along the lines of, "I'll never vote for a Democrat. They've never done anything for me," unquote.
Steve Gilliard replies, and remember again, this is from 20 years ago. So here's the thing. We're wrong. We have to stop. We have to do something different. Let's examine this Laura B., what she got from us, domestic violence workshops, what she got from the church, food, a job, and people who said they loved her. The church gave her something to do, a narrative to organize her life around, someone to tell her what to do. Are we prepared to do that? To make her a bowl of soup and sit there and hold her hand while she eats it and pretend to love her and force our narrative on her to own her, to tell her what to think? I think probably not. Because we're liberals, we believe in teaching her skills, in getting her a job, giving her a loan, maybe lecturing her. But she doesn't want to learn skills. She's weak and tired and afraid. She doesn't want to think. And most people would rather be preached at by a preacher than a social worker.
We have this idealized image of our fellow humans, that human nature is perfectible, that people go for what's best for them, that given the opportunity, people want to be happy and free. We're liberals. We believe that given equal access to information and resources, people will work towards happiness, that they'll act for the best interest for themselves, their family, their community, their country, and eventually the world. We're wrong. And Elsie? She's just a willfully ignorant asshole who votes. And there's millions just like her. They want to take what we give them and then go to the polls and vote so that those things are gone forever. For everyone. I say, hey, dumbass, you don't see your Medicare, your Social Security, your safe food, medicine, your right to vote and own property, all these rights and safeties liberals fought and died for. You hate liberalism because Sean Hannity told you to? Fine, give it all up. Lose all your rights, your safety, and your comfort. Great, but don't drag us down with you. Why should I lose my rights because all the Elsies in the world go vote their hatred and delusions as their pastor Karl Rove's bidding?
We can read Mark Ames' The Spite Vote. We can read Frank's What's the Matter with Kansas. We can think and discuss and argue and get angry with each other for various sins of political incorrectness all day long. And in the end, we're left facing the fact that more people than we thought possible are just plain assholes. They're mean, they're weak, they're cowardly, they're hateful, and they're fucking stupid. They just voted in their president, and they're marching us toward a fascist state. And it doesn't matter if the election was debolded and robocalled and thwarted at the polls either. It should never have been this close enough to steal. These people never vote for good government. They don't even believe in government. They're spoiled little toddlers who freak out when they're expected to share. They don't think they have to pay for anything that they take. And they're right. They don't. We do.
Who do you think a good, righteous, Bush-voting fundy hates more? Osama bin Laden or a New York City liberal? The corporate media right away dusted off the old canard. The Democrats need to reach out more to the heartland. Does that sound familiar, boys and girls?
Yeah.
Reach out? Forget that these folks blindly ignored all objective reality and their own best economic and national security interests and voted for Bush. Look what they did at the Senate level. In Kentucky, they refused to use even basic sanity as a litmus test and re-elected a guy with late-stage dementia. That would be Mitch McConnell. Mm-hmm. In Oklahoma, they tapped a fellow who wants to execute doctors who perform abortions, who was sued for sterilizing a woman against her will, who pled guilty to Medicaid fraud, and who largely opposes federal subsidies, even for his own state. In Louisiana, they embraced a man who made backdoor deals with David Duke, and who was revealed to have had a long-running affair with a prostitute. In South Carolina, they went with a guy who thinks all gay teachers should be fired. And in Alaska, they reelected a woman who her father appointed to the job after a spectacularly undistinguished career as an obscure state senator. And compared with the rest of the GOP class of 04, she's the fucking prize. These are the wonderful elected officials that the heartland has foisted on the rest of us. Reach out to these voters? Yeah. Then pull back a bloody stump. We had the largest turnout of voters ever. All sorts of people who used to vote Republican came out for Kerry. Bush was exposed in the debates as a crooked psycho fraud that he is. The youth vote did turn out 5 million more. The Senate isn't all white anymore. But still, we lost. And now we're mega fucked. Big time.
Bush Co. are not politicians. They do not make policy. They are crooks, robber barons. They pulled an inside job. They create failed states and terrorism so they can loot and pillage and not pay taxes and never be subject to regulations. They will kill our planet and they'll make us like it. Let's face it, all right? Enough politeness. They allowed 9/11 to happen and they profit from it. They allowed all those munitions in Iraq to be looted and they'll profit from it. Endless war and chaos is good for them. They've been fostering failed states for a long time. Sudan, Congo, Afghanistan, any place where there are tons of natural resources and no central government to impose those pesky taxes or regulations. They are not interested in or concerned about the well-being of any nation. They are global supervillains, stateless CEOs of multinational corporations who benefit from war, from failed states, from terrorism, from stupidity, greed, and craven fear. You think the Carlyle Group doesn't benefit from the USA needing to buy more tanks because ours keep getting blown up? Halliburton's making, in so many ways, a killing.
So listen, in Tao, absence is as strong as presence. I am not advocating hatred. I'm not saying to fight them or to be mean to them. I am saying stop trying to give them something they don't want. It isn't working. When you fight, your energy feeds what you're fighting against. When you resist, your resistance props it up. When you hate, you become what you hate. And when you keep reaching out your hand in loving kindness to someone who hates your fucking guts and wants you dead, you're an idiot. So stop it.
Stop enabling them. Stop fighting for them. Stop trying to give them something they don't want. Just stop. Stop not telling the truth because it'll hurt their feelings and cause unpleasantness. They're bigots. They are going to change the Constitution to make you a second-class citizen. They are going to keep carpet bombing cities full of civilians. They are going to continue to disappear American citizens, keep putting innocent people in our concentration camp in Cuba, keep on encouraging and allowing terrorist acts on blue state cities, continue to rape and torture and murder and complain about how immoral liberals are.
And there's not a damn thing we can do about it except starve them out. Start now, because this is what they voted for. And that's the end of that portion of the Steve Gilliard column from 20 years ago, because this is what they voted for. This is who they are. And all those people out there trying to pretend it was about the price of eggs, or liberals being snooty, or using big words, or feeling offended, or whatever the fuck, is just a 1,000 times this column. That has nothing to do with why they voted for a rapist, fascist scumbag and all of his rapist scumbag friends to run the country. They did it because they hate this country. And they hate us for trying to give them shit they don't want. They don't want anything we have to offer them. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to govern. And the only way we're going to stop them is by letting them destroy themselves. And they're going to destroy a lot of us with them. And that's the shame of it. But this is what they voted for. Yeah. And anyone who tells you otherwise, David Brooks or any other goddamn pundit working for the New York Times, is lying to you. Know that. Hold it close to your heart. Remember what Samuel Jackson said every time they bring the subject up and pretend it's something else. Yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
Anyway.
Let's do a news roundup, Drip Glass.
All right. You
From
go first.
Politico. Republicans suddenly think the economy's great and the election wasn't rigged. Less than 2 weeks since Donald Trump's victory, consumer sentiment in the Republican Party has skyrocketed.
Because
he's not president yet.
Because they are reprogrammable meatbags, Blue Gal.
Yep.
That's what they are. Now, the laugh of the week comes to us from this. Quote, in stunning turnaround, MSNBC's Mika and Joe meet with Donald Trump to kiss the ring. In an astounding about-face, Donald Trump's most strident on-air critics, MSNBC's Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, kissed and made up with the president-elect. On Friday, the Morning Joe hosts kneeled at Mar-a-Lago to make nice with Trump, the man who promised to round up the fake news media, a.k.a. the enemy of the people. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful. He was upbeat. He seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. Brzezinski dutifully said, as if she just stepped out of Stepford, Connecticut. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him, she continued, as if Trump is capable of having a two-way conversation with anyone other than his own reflection. For those asking, why would we speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, I would ask, why wouldn't we?
From Brian Stelter, quote, loyal Morning Joe viewers are furious about the Trump meeting. Jeff Jarvis called it a betrayal of their colleagues, democracy, and us all. It is a disgusting show of obedience in advance. Some fans are vowing not to watch the show anymore, unquote.
And that's the funny part. That's the part that should make you laugh. It's a dry, wry kind of gallows humor. But the funny part is the last bit about loyal Morning Joe viewers. You mean credulous chumps who actually believed his fucking act? You mean those people? Yeah, I'm sure they're very upset to have the rug yanked out from under them for the umpteenth time and vowing not to watch the show anymore. Come on. And MSNBC runs a reputation laundromat to rehabilitate the reputation of Republicans 24/7. That's the main business they're in. And it's hilarious to think that some of the most credulous liberals out there won't come trooping right on back to MSNBC because, hey, where the fuck else can you go? You got nobody else but Joe Scarborough in the morning. And eventually you'll come back, and they fucking know it.
From the Wrap, quote, MSNBC viewership drops by half in days after Trump victory. You think?
Yeah. And
you know, Nikki Haley said, they weren't looking at what was right and wrong. They were looking at their ratings.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to have Trump on the phone.
Yep.
They did it dozens of times on a monthly schedule, quid pro quo. They're going to do it again for ratings.
I also should mention, I did listen to the Bulwark Tim Miller talking to Bill Kristol for my sins. And one of the funniest things out there was, you might remember that shortly before the nomination or after the nomination of Donald Trump, Bill Kristol and Joe Scarborough got into a slap fight on the Joe Scarborough show over who was to blame for this. And it was ugly. It was real ugly because Joe Scarborough swore up and down he had nothing to do with it. We've always been critical of Donald Trump. What the fuck are you talking about, Bill Kristol? And Bill Kristol's like, yeah, whatever, man. Like he wasn't on your show every day, you sucking his dick. I'm just translating into my own argot that what really happened. But once everybody made up and pretended that they were all allies and they're all the resistance, they locked that away in a crypt and no one ever spoke of it again because forgetting the past is really, really very important until this happened. And suddenly, Bill Kristol cracked the vault open and said, hey, does everybody remember back when the 2016, when we got into that big fight, I guess Joe hasn't changed his tune or something like that.
Yeah,
It really is this selective editing of the past to fit whatever the current mood of the Never Trumpers are at the moment. Right. And at the moment, it's important for Bill Kristol to remind everybody that he took on Joe Scarborough back in 2016 and we had a big fight on the air. Now, the addendum to this little tete-a-tete or this little fight was gleefully reported by a MAGA scumbag reporter named Tom Elliott. Quote, Scarborough says the backlash to his 180 on Trump doesn't reflect reality. Yesterday, I saw for the first time what a massive disconnect there was between social media and the real world because we were flooded with phone calls from people all day, literally around the world, very positive, very supportive, unquote. Let me translate that for you. Joe Squint Scarborough says, fuck you to all those loyal Morning Joe viewers. And you know what? There was also not one host on any MSNBC program anywhere that said a mumbling word about any of this.
They're not allowed to.
No, not
especially about Scarborough. There is a definite Berlin Wall between Scarborough and the rest of the shows. Yeah.
Yep.
From Blue Sky News via ZDNet, Blue Sky now has more than 20 million users and shows no signs of slowing down.
Yeah. Come join us. Come join us. You really want to come join us. This is from the New York Times. Quote, liberals are left out in the cold as social media veers right. As you can tell from this podcast, we're just veering right hard all the time.
Yeah, right.
If the election underscored anything about the internet, about which we know a great deal, including that it's a series of tubes, it was the ascendancy of social media platforms for the right. That put Democrats at a disadvantage, Blue Gal, unquote, because
Peter Baker write this?
Because, we don't exist. I mean, This is something that I'm sure the Pod Say boys would agree with them, that you and I and people like us don't exist, except even as they try to boil the dust speck on which we exist. We are here, and we intend to stay here until the last dog dies.
Yeah. There does seem to be a battle at that pod save level of we're here to replace CNN for you.
Yeah, good luck with that, man.
Yeah, right. From Brother Charlie Pierce, this just cracks me up because I can hear him saying it in my head.
And this is just for the headlines. I'm not going to read the whole article, but go ahead.
The center does not exist. The Democrats need to stop giving such a damn.
Uh-huh.
There's no center worth capitulating to anymore. They need to fight and let the chips fall. This is what we're saying. Let them fail.
Yeah. Well, this is, apparently no labels is not going to save us, Blue Gal. Isn't that a shame? The likely next chairman of the Department of Defense is 20 different kinds of sick and malevolent. This is just one example. Pete Hegseth published a column in college that claimed having sex with an unconscious woman is not rape. The piece published by Hegseth claimed that rape required both the failure to consent and duress, and women who are passed out cannot experience duress. Hegseth has also said that women should not be allowed to serve in combat, and just a bunch of other horrific shit that prove that he's a Christian nationalist scumbag right down to his shoot.
From the Columbia Journalism Review, quote, Trump threatens New York Times Penguin Random House over critical coverage. Legal letter follows complaints aimed at CBS News, The Washington Post, and The Daily Beast. The letter addressed to lawyers at the New York Times and Penguin Random House arrived a week before the election. Attached was a discursive 10-page legal threat from an attorney for Donald Trump that demanded $10 billion in damages. Why not trillion, Driftglass?
Right. Why not?
Over false and defamatory statements contained in articles by Peter Baker, Michael S. Schmidt, Suzanne Craig, and Russ Butner, unquote. I think Hillary Clinton is in line ahead of him.
Oh, I think
for
so.
False and defamatory statements made by the New York fucking Times.
I want to know what free speech absolutist Elon Musk's this. And Peter
Yeah.
Baker, I guess you just didn't bow low enough, Peter. I guess
No,
that's
you
the
didn't
problem.
bend over hard enough and fast enough. Yeah.
To the very long list of weak creatures bending the knee to Donald Trump, add Trump's COVID whisperer, Deborah Birx, who said that the selection of RFK Jr. will amplify discussion of public health. Quote, what I'm hoping is he brings his transparency for all Americans and we really start to tackle these issues one by one by one, unquote. What a thing. What a creature she is. What an absolute belly-crawling coward that is.
One of the Reddit channels I follow makes fun of QAnon people, but they are really, really upset that Trump has been elected for 3 weeks and hasn't arrested the Clintons yet.
I know. What's going on, man?
Yeah.
I thought he was secretly in control of everything anyway.
I thought he was already president and they had the white soldiers in the military under his wing. Yeah.
So weird. I can't follow it anymore. Blue Gal.
He hasn't pardoned the J6ers yet.
Nope.
And he hasn't arrested the Clintons.
Right. For all the murders and all the drug dealing.
For
and
everything.
Yeah.
For everything they did. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The pedophiles. All the pedophilia and the basements.
Everything. Everything, the drugs, everything. Yeah. Why aren't they in jail?
Right.
He's
Great
failed.
Question.
Donald Trump has failed already.
Mm-hmm. The failed Trump administration, we can say right now.
Failed Trump administration. Get ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And get ready for the leaks, too.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the leaks.
Well,
all right.
If I may add what Commissioner Gordon said in Batman, in a town this bent, who is there to rat to?
Right.
I mean, who are they going to be leaking to? The news media? Are you kidding me? Like, who? Peter Baker? Peter Baker's going to be running from lawsuits for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think there's some people that are going to want the gossipy part of it. The New York Post flips on a dime to put whatever on the cover to get people to pick it up. So,
look, if you have dirt to leak, there are liberal blogs out there that would love to hear from you.
There are liberal blogs out there that'll take it. Yeah,
believe it or not.
Hey, we have gratitude to Paul Farhi for aggregating this next story on the socials. Quote: the outbreak of measles in Samoa, starting in September 2019, created a panic. Schools closed, Christmas events were canceled, lockdowns ensued. People stayed inside their houses, and the unvaccinated hung red flags or red clothing in their front yards, both as a warning and to signal to emergency health workers that they wanted to be vaccinated. The U.S. and other countries rushed in medical teams and vaccines, even with draconian measures. By early January, about 3% of the island's entire population had been infected with measles, and 83 people died, most of them infants and children. How did it happen? Health officials said the island's immunization rate had fallen dramatically in the years preceding the outbreak, and anti-vax misinformation was rife. The latter got so bad that an anti-vaccination activist, Edwin Tomasisi, was arrested and charged with incitement against a government order after he said the vaccines were dangerous and encouraged people not to get them. Crazy, huh? Well, another guy had a part in all this too. A few months before the measles outbreak, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. went to Samoa. During his trip, Kennedy met with and publicly supported leading anti-vaxxers, putting whatever credibility he had behind those encouraging people not to seek immunization. Kennedy later acknowledged his trip to Samoa had been arranged by Edwin Tomasisi. The guy later arrested by the government for incitement. The charges against Tomasisi were later dropped. Kennedy later wrote a blog post describing Tomasisi as a medical freedom hero. He's a baby killer, is what he is. 83 babies died. Kennedy had all manner of disclaimers about his trip to Samoa. But it's what he didn't do that's worth noting. Encourage people to save their lives and the lives of their babies by getting vaccinated. Anyway, that's the guy who'll be in charge of America's health. Postscript. The Samoan outbreak subsided in January 2020. That's 4 months after it started. Only 4 months. And it hasn't returned. Why? The crash government vaccination program managed to reach 90% of the population, a level considered herd immunity for a highly infectious disease like fucking measles.
Yep.
I added the fucking, but
yeah,
that's thank you for that thread.
It's they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. Robert Kennedy's insane. That's why he's being put in charge of the thing, because they want to break everything. They want to break it, loot it, and move on to the next target. And America is a big, rich country, and there's lots to sell. There's lots of stupid people who can be angried up and turned out into the streets as brown shirts, and that's the fucking plan. So it's going to be a shit show. Trump's transition team is bypassing traditional FBI background checks for at least some cabinet picks while using private companies to vet potential candidates for administration jobs. Trump has to hire people who have a big reason not to testify against him later. It's the fucking mob.
Yep. That's when you get outraged by another sex pervert, really another sex pervert in the cabinet? He's picking people guilty of rape because they won't testify against him.
Right.
MSNBC is reporting that Trump is making a list of soldiers involved in the Afghanistan withdrawal to be court-martialed. These are soldiers who obeyed his own withdrawal timetable.
You didn't get a lot of that in the news. You got a lot of Biden this and Biden that. All of our Never Trump allies over the Bulwark were just hair on fire because, they're 90% neocons who want to decapitate every regime in the region and take it over for, I don't know, AMCO or whoever. That was the plan.
They're war stocks. They're war stocks.
Kill off all the regimes in the region and inflict democracy on. That was Bill Kristol's whole program. But the thing that led to that was Donald Trump setting the timetable, Donald Trump signing it into law, Donald Trump inviting the Taliban to the United States, they never showed, and Donald Trump releasing 5,000 Taliban terrorists in advance of all this, which didn't get 1/1000th of the mention in the legacy media as Joe Biden screwed it all up. Joe Biden did this, Joe Biden did that, which is why, they're dead. The legacy media is dead. Get over it. We'll have a funeral later. And finally, the future chair of the FCC, Brendan Carr, announced his top priority, quote, "We must dismantle the censorship cartel and restore freedom of speech rights for everyday Americans," unquote. Elon Musk immediately replied and praised him. And here's a fun fact. Mr. Carr wrote the chapter on the FCC in the conservative blueprint, Project 2025.
Which Donald Trump knows nothing about and was never going to implement, right?
No,
but all these Project 2025 guys are getting positions where they're actually going to make policy. Yeah. Deep breath. Feel free to write to both of us at proleftpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. We love that you're signing up to be a Patreon and writing us a note with that saying you're the only podcast we're listening to because I need to stay sane. We get it. It's hard. It is really hard. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service Go Postal Unions letter on the air unless you say otherwise.
Don't forget that gourmet coffee guideline. You know what it is. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job, and it's going to be a hell of a job for the next 4 years at least. If you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/proleftpod. Please also, if you can, share our show on social media. If you love this podcast, get someone else to listen. We deeply appreciate you doing that. It increases our numbers and increases the pool of people who will know that they're not crazy, they're not wrong, and they're not doing.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties have a message for Mitch McConnell as he tries to pretend he didn't build all of this.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25. GGBG Productions.